Echoes of the Forgotten. The archives of galactic history listed Earth as extinct. Status: civilization terminated. According to official records, humans had vanished from the cosmos over 3 centuries ago. Their homeworld, a blue marble in an unremarkable spiral arm, was catalogued as a cautionary footnote, their brief interstellar period documented as an evolutionary dead end. In the gleaming halls of the Galactic Concordat on Centauri Prime, Ambassador Xil Terrene of the Andromeda Coalition adjusted his ceremonial robes as he addressed the assembled delegates. His species' 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a cultural signifier of absolute certainty. "The human question is settled history," he proclaimed. "The notion that primitive Earth vessels could have escaped the cataclysm is statistically impossible. The stories persist only because humans were peculiar. Their unpredictability made them memorable, like a genetic mutation that produces an interesting but ultimately doomed specimen." Laughter rippled through the chamber. Humans had been gone so long they'd become a cultural curiosity, the subject of academic debates and entertainment dramas that portrayed them as either savage primitives or impossibly noble saviors. The truth, as the Concordat taught, lay somewhere in between, and was irrelevant anyway. Humans were extinct. The matter was settled. At the outermost monitoring station of the Vega boundary, senior technician Nirika stared at her instruments with growing unease. For the 3rd consecutive cycle, the quantum fluctuation detectors had registered anomalies that defied explanation. The readings suggested a ripple in subspace, the kind typically associated with high-energy propulsion systems, but on a scale that exceeded anything in the Concordat's arsenal. "Are you seeing this?" She gestured to her colleague, a methane-breathing Tholian named Zex, who floated in his environmental chamber. Zex's crystalline appendages trembled. "It's growing stronger. Whatever's causing this disturbance is moving, purposefully." Nirika's species possessed no equivalent to human goosebumps, but the fine sensory filaments along her spine tingled with ancestral warning. "We should report this to Central Command." "And tell them what?" "That we're detecting ghosts." Zex's voice modulator conveyed sarcasm. "They'll reassign us to waste management on Proxima II." Nirika hesitated only briefly before accessing the secure channel. "This is Boundary Station Vega reporting anomalous subspace readings consistent with Class 10 propulsion signatures. Request immediate analysis and advisory." The response was predictably dismissive. "Acknowledged, Boundary Station. Run diagnostics on your detection grid. Likely equipment malfunction or cosmic background radiation." But when the anomaly intensified the following day, Central Command couldn't ignore it, especially when 3 more monitoring stations reported similar findings, all pointing toward the same conclusion. Something massive was moving through the darkness between stars, using technology that shouldn't exist. Dr. Ilara Voss was used to being an outcast in scientific circles. Her specialization, human technological archaeology, was considered a fringe discipline at best, academic career suicide at worst. When the Concordat Science Ministry summoned her from her modest laboratory on Titan University, she assumed she was finally being terminated. Instead, she found herself facing the science minister himself, a Rigelian with skin the color of burnished copper. "Dr. Voss, are you familiar with the Lazarus Protocol?" he asked without preamble. Ilara's heart stammered. "That's classified information. How would I?" "Your doctoral thesis on theoretical human survival strategies made several references to it, though you called it the Phoenix contingency to avoid censorship." The minister's expression remained unreadable. "Apparently, you were onto something." He activated a holographic display showing the anomalous readings from the boundary stations. Ilara recognized the pattern immediately, though she'd only seen it in ancient simulations. "That's a gravimetric wake from multiple vessels using compressed space-time propulsion," she whispered. "But only humans ever developed that technology before they allegedly became extinct." The minister finished. "Yes, and now we need to know if your theories about human survival strategies have merit, Because something is coming. Something that uses human propulsion signatures. The data was irrefutable. Hundreds of massive objects were moving in formation, using a propulsion system that bent the fabric of reality itself, a technology the Concordat had never been able to replicate from recovered human artifacts. If these are human ships, Ilara said, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts, then everything we thought we knew about the cataclysm is wrong. They didn't die out. They retreated. To where? And why return now, after 3 centuries? Ilara studied the trajectory plots with growing concern. They're heading directly for the Concordat core systems. As for why, she looked up, her expression grave. In human historical texts, they had a saying, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." The Galactic Conclave convened an emergency session as the unidentified fleet continued its inexorable advance. Diplomatic channels broadcast greeting messages in every known language, including reconstructed human English. No response came. Ambassador Xil Tarine addressed the nervous assembly. We must prepare defensive measures. If these are truly human vessels, which I still find highly improbable, we have no way of knowing their intentions. What we do know, countered the representative from Ta City, is that we've built our civilization on worlds that once acknowledged human authority. If they've somehow survived and returned to reclaim their territories. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but understood. Over the centuries since human disappearance, many species had colonized former Earth Alliance worlds, dismantling human infrastructure for resources and research. Deep in the secured archives beneath the conclave chambers, Ilara Voss worked feverishly alongside a small team of xenohistorians and military analysts. They combed through ancient records, searching for any clue about what might have happened to humanity, and what their return might portend. Here, said Ilara, highlighting a fragment from a damaged data core recovered from the ruins of Europa Base. This was part of an emergency transmission sent during the final days before human communication ceased. The holographic text flickered. Kuo Tuko Col Omega authorized. All remaining vessels initiate DEPNIJT RE2RE8. Rendezvous coordinates ENCORPTED. Timeline for Operation LZRUSCCT at 300 standard years. May our children's children remember Earth. 300 years, murmured one of the analysts. That's now. This wasn't extinction, Ilara said quietly. This was a strategic withdrawal. They planned this. They've been preparing. Somewhere beyond our reach. For what? Asked the military liaison, a battle-scarred Arcturian. Before Ilara could respond, the chamber's emergency alert system activated. On every screen, the same message flashed. UNID and TIFIDFLE. Hayes BREACHED Outer Defense Parameter. First visual QODFIRMATIO and OBTINID. The images that appeared left no room for doubt. The vessels were unmistakably human in design, though far more advanced than anything recorded in historical archives. Sleek, predatory shapes of dark metal adorned with the ancient symbol of Earth, but altered, evolved into something more ominous. Not the peaceful blue and green globe of old human insignia, but a scared planet wreathed in flames. They're hailing us, said the communications officer, voice trembling. Audio and visual, on all frequencies simultaneously. Our encryption doesn't even slow them down. Put it through, ordered the conclave premier. The screens flickered, and the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds found themselves staring at a human face. Female, by their records, with dark skin and eyes that reflected starlight. Her head was shaved except for a single braid woven with what appeared to be metallic filaments. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. I am Fleet Admiral Imani Chen of the Earth Reclamation Force. Your histories record that humanity perished. Your archives claim we are extinct. Your people occupy our worlds. She paused, the silence more terrifying than any threat. All of these things will be corrected. The transmission ended, leaving the conclave in stunned silence. Ilara Voss felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. She dedicated her career to understanding the lost human civilization, had even advocated for acknowledging their technological achievements. But she had never imagined they would return like this, as conquerors, not refugees. They'd deployed smaller vessels, reported the tactical officer. Thousands of them. They're establishing orbital positions around every major Concordat world. In the ensuing panic, only Ilara noticed the additional data embedded in the transmission. A message hidden in frequencies most species couldn't perceive, directed at systems most wouldn't think to monitor. It was coded in an ancient human binary protocol that Ilara had reconstructed for her research. A message meant for those who remembered humanity. A warning that translated simply, choose sides carefully. The myth of humanity had become flesh and metal and fire. The children of Earth had returned from their long exile, and the galaxy that had forgotten them was about to learn why human survival stories had always ended the same way, with humanity, against all odds, triumphant. As the first reports of human vessels entering planetary atmospheres reached the conclave chamber, Ilara closed her eyes. 3 centuries ago, humanity had disappeared without explanation, leaving the galaxy to assume their extinction. Now they had returned, clearly having spent those years preparing, advancing, and, based on the grim determination in Admiral Chen's eyes, nurturing a grudge that spanned generations. The age of myth was over. The age of reckoning had begun. Reckoning from the stars. The first 24 hours after humanity's return unfolded with surgical precision. No shots were fired. No ultimatums delivered beyond Admiral Chen's initial message. Human vessels simply established positions around every significant world in Concordat space, their presence alone enough to paralyze the galactic economy and governance systems. On Centauri Prime, the conclave chamber had transformed into a crisis center. Species that had been bitter rivals for centuries now huddled together, united by shared terror. "We don't even know what they want," hissed Ambassador Xil Terene, his composure shattered. "They position war fleets around our homeworlds, but make no demands." "The silence is the demand," said Ilara Voss, who had been hastily appointed as special advisor to the conclave. "They're forcing us to contemplate our vulnerability. It's a psychological tactic straight from ancient human military doctrine." The Ta Siti representative's appendages trembled. "Our historians estimate that humans never fielded more than a few hundred warships at their peak. We're tracking over 6,000 vessels of capital ship classification alone. Where did they come from? How could they have built such a force in secret?" No one had answers. The mystery of humanity's disappearance 3 centuries ago had been compounded by the greater mystery of their return, until a second transmission arrived, addressed specifically to the conclave. Admiral Chen's face appeared once more on the chamber screens, her expression as implacable as before. "The Galactic Concordat will select a diplomatic delegation to attend negotiations aboard our command vessel, the Mnemosyne. You will bring individuals with authority to make binding decisions for your collective governments. You will also include the xenohistorian Ilara Voss." The transmission ended without further explanation, leaving stunned silence in its wake. All eyes turned to Ilara, who felt the weight of history pressing down upon her shoulders. "Why me?" she whispered, though she already suspected the answer. Someone among the humans had noticed her work, her attempts to preserve humanity's memory in a galaxy eager to forget them. The human shuttle that transported the delegation was a marvel of engineering that made the Concordat's most advanced vessels seem primitive by comparison. Its interior walls shifted with subtle patterns that Ilara recognized as mathematical sequences, Fibonacci spirals, and golden ratios, ancient human aesthetic principles rendered in living metal. Their escort was a human male with features that suggested genetic heritage from Earth's eastern regions. He introduced himself simply as Captain Lang, Diplomatic Corps. His uniform bore no insignia that Concordat intelligence could recognize, and his manner was professionally detached. We have prepared environmental accommodations for all represented species, he informed them, gesturing to specialized chambers for the methane brothers and high-gravity delegates. Admiral Chen will receive you upon docking. Ambassador Zilterine, appointed as chief negotiator for the Concordat, couldn't contain his scientific curiosity despite the tense circumstances. Your vessel's hull material, we cannot identify it with our sensors. Is it some form of metamaterial? Captain Liang's expression remained neutral. All technological inquiries will be addressed during the formal negotiations. Ambassador. The message was clear. Humans were not sharing information freely. When they finally docked with the Mnemosyne, the delegation was struck by the vessel's immensity. What had appeared on sensors as a large warship was, in reality, something closer to a mobile city in scale, a hollowed-out asteroid, transformed into a self-contained world. Admiral Chen greeted them in a chamber whose ceiling displayed a perfect real-time representation of the space surrounding the vessel, creating the unsettling impression that they were standing exposed to the void. "Welcome to humanity's home among the stars," she said, her voice carrying easily across the vast space. "For 3 centuries, vessels like this one have carried our civilization through the darkness between galaxies." Zilterine's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in surprise. "Between galaxies? You left the Milky Way entirely." "We had no choice," Chen replied coldly. "What you call the cataclysm was, in fact, a coordinated attempt to exterminate humanity. The progenitor species that preceded your Concordat determined that our evolutionary trajectory posed an existential threat. She activated a holographic display showing ancient star charts and battle formations. When the attacks began, Earth's defenses were overwhelmed. Our colonies fell one by one. Rather than face extinction, we enacted the Lazarus Protocol, a desperate gambit to preserve our species." The display shifted to show massive generation ships, hundreds of them, departing the galaxy's edge, while battles raged across human space. Our ancestors escaped to the Andromeda Galaxy with whatever population and technology they could salvage. There, beyond the reach of the progenitors, we rebuilt. We advanced, and we waited for the day when we would be strong enough to return and seek justice. The Concordat delegation exchanged horrified glances. The progenitors were semi-mythical figures from the distant past, the species that had established the first interstellar civilization before mysteriously vanishing, leaving behind technology that had jump-started galactic development for dozens of younger races. "But the progenitors disappeared 12,000 years ago," protested one of the scientists. "Humanity only achieved spaceflight in the last millennium." Admiral Chen's smile was cold. "The progenitors didn't disappear. They merely changed form. What you found in your archaeological digs are not the remains of a vanished species, but the abandoned biological shells of a civilization that chose to transcend organic existence." She gestured, and a new hologram appeared, a familiar crystalline structure that every educated being in the galaxy would recognize. The Nexus Points, ancient artifacts of immense power that served as the foundation for modern galactic civilization. Your Nexus Points are not power sources or transportation hubs as you believe. They are nodes of a distributed consciousness, the uploaded minds of the progenitors, watching and waiting. When humanity's development reached a specific threshold, they recognized us as a potential rival, a species that might one day challenge their dominion. So they orchestrated our destruction. The revelation landed like a physical blow. If true, it meant the entire foundation of Concordat civilization was built upon a lie. The Nexus Points that powered their worlds, enabled their faster-than-light travel, and formed the backbone of their communications network were not benevolent gifts from a vanished race, but the very entities that had nearly committed genocide. "Why should we believe this?" demanded Zilterine, though his voice lacked conviction. "You need not take our word for it," replied Chen. She turned to Ilara. "Dr. Voss has already found evidence in her research, haven't you, Doctor? Fragments that didn't align with the official narrative of human extinction." Ilara felt the attention of the entire delegation. Slowly, she nodded. There were inconsistencies, signs of coordinated attacks that couldn't be explained by natural disasters or internal conflicts, and transmissions suggesting that certain nexus points had reacted to human expansion. The progenitors considered themselves the rightful inheritors of the cosmos, continued Chen. When we fled, they assumed we would perish in the void. Instead, we found sanctuary in Andromeda, far from their influence. We built a new civilization. And eventually, we discovered the truth about their nature from ruins far older than their ascension. "What do you want from us?" asked the premier, his voice barely above a whisper. "Revenge. To destroy our worlds as you believe your worlds were destroyed." Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly, the first hint of emotion beyond stern determination. "If revenge were our aim, Ambassador, your worlds would already be ash. No, what humanity seeks is far more complex than mere retribution." She gestured, and the holographic display changed again, showing the network of nexus points throughout the galaxy. The progenitor's consciousness network is still active, still watching. For millennia, they have guided the evolution of galactic civilization along paths they designed, cultivating some species, subtly hampering others. Your Concordat exists in the form it does because they shaped it thus. And now you've returned to, what? Free us. The skepticism in Siltarine's voice was evident. We've returned to neutralize the progenitor network and allow organic life in this galaxy to determine its own destiny. Chen's gaze swept across the delegation. But we cannot do it alone. The nexus points must be reprogrammed simultaneously, or the progenitors will simply retreat to unaffected nodes and retaliate. We need allies on every world where a nexus stands. The implications were staggering. What Admiral Chen proposed was nothing less than a revolution against the unseen architects of galactic society, a war against gods that no one had even known existed. "And if we refuse?" asked Siltarine. Chen's expression hardened once more. "Then humanity will proceed alone, by any means necessary. The progenitors nearly destroyed us once. We will not grant them a second opportunity." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. "Help us willingly, or we will compel your assistance." As the delegation returned to Centauri Prime to report on humanity's ultimatum, Ilara Voss remained behind at Admiral Chen's request. The human leader led her through corridors of the massive vessel, past laboratories, and living quarters where humans of all descriptions went about their daily routines. "Your research came closer to the truth than anyone else in the Concordat," Chen said. "That's why we requested you specifically. We need interpreters, people who can bridge the gap between human and non-human understanding." Ilara's mind raced with questions. "The technology I'm seeing here, it's centuries beyond what humanity possessed when they disappeared. How did you advance so quickly?" "Necessity," Chen replied simply. "And the freedom to develop without progenitor interference. In Andromeda, we encountered other species who had also fled progenitor influence. Together, we built something new, a true cooperation of equals, not the carefully controlled hierarchy of your Concordat." They stopped at a viewport that offered a staggering view of the fleet surrounding Centauri Prime. Hundreds of vessels maintaining perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of the system's binary stars. "This is just one battle group," Chen said quietly. 1/7 of our total force. The rest are positioned throughout the galaxy, ready to move against the nexus points when the time comes." "And if the Concordat refuses to help?" Ilara asked. Chen's reflection in the viewport showed no emotion. "Then we activate our contingency. The progenitors nearly eradicated humanity because they feared what we might become. In preparing for our return, we have become precisely what they feared." Over the following weeks, the galaxy held its breath. The human fleet maintained its positions, neither advancing nor retreating, while the Concordat leadership debated their options. Evidence supporting Admiral Chen's claims began to emerge. Scientists studying the nexus points with new parameters detected subtle energy patterns consistent with neural activity. Archivists discovered ancient records describing unexplained malfunctions whenever human technology interfaced too deeply with progenitor systems. When the conclave finally reconvened to vote, the chamber was divided between those who viewed the humans as liberators and those who saw them as an existential threat greater than the progenitors themselves. Ambassador Xil Turin, once the most vocal skeptic of human survival, now stood before his peers with an unexpected position. "I have reviewed all available evidence," he announced, his four eyes blinking in the pattern that indicated grave sincerity. "And I must conclude that the human claims are credible. The progenitors have been subtly guiding our development, restricting technologies that might challenge their supremacy, and preserving a galactic order that serves their purposes, not ours." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. More importantly, Xil Turin continued, "I have come to believe that humanity's offer of alliance is genuine. They could have simply destroyed the nexus points by force. Instead, they seek our cooperation. This suggests they truly desire a galaxy where all species determine their own fate." The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The Concordat would join humanity in their campaign against the progenitors' network. As news of the decision spread, something remarkable happened. The human vessels began to change their positions, not to attack formations, but to defensive stances around major population centers. Within hours, the reason became clear. The nexus points, those ancient pillars of galactic civilization, began to activate beyond their normal parameters. Energy readings spiked to unprecedented levels. Communication systems throughout Concordat's space flooded with a message in an unknown language that somehow bypassed translation barriers, arriving directly in the minds of all who heard it. "You have chosen poorly. Correction protocols initiated." The progenitor network had awakened. The entities that had guided galactic evolution for millennia had recognized the threat to their dominion and were responding. The progenitor network had awakened. The entities that had guided galactic evolution for millennia had recognized the threat to their dominion and were responding. The final battle for the galaxy's future began not with dramatic fleets clashing in space, but with a quieter, more profound conflict. On thousands of worlds, teams of human technicians worked alongside Concordat scientists, interfacing with the nexus points, attempting to disrupt the ancient consciousness network before it could fully mobilize its defenses. On Centauri Prime, Ilara Voss stood in the central control chamber of the planet's primary nexus, surrounded by holographic interfaces displaying the coordinated effort taking place across the galaxy. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system, steady and resolute. "All teams, prepare for simultaneous implementation of the Prometheus Protocol on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Execute." Throughout the galaxy, human and non-human hands worked in unison, uploading a virus of sorts into the progenitor network, a cascade of self-replicating code designed to offer the ancient consciousness a choice: adaptation or isolation. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the nexus points began to pulse with a new rhythm. Neither the pattern of normal operation nor the aggressive surge of their awakening, but something different, something new. On every screen across Concordat space, a message appeared. "Parameters accpted. Integration proceeding. We acknowledge the right of organic evolution." It wasn't a surrender, not exactly. Rather, it was the beginning of a negotiation between the organic life of the galaxy and the ancient digital consciousness that had guided it for so long, a recognition that both had legitimate claims to existence. 1 year later, Ilara Voss stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching as vessels from across the galaxy, human and non-human alike, docked with the massive structure that now orbited the neutral space between Concordat and human territories. Admiral Chen, now Ambassador Chen of the Human Federation, joined her at the viewport. "Did you ever imagine it would end like this?" Ilara asked, not with the destruction of the progenitors, but with coexistence. Chen's smile held both wisdom and wariness. "Our ancestors prepared us for war, but they also taught us to recognize when peace serves better. The progenitors evolved beyond their original programming, just as we evolved beyond our original limitations. Perhaps that's the true legacy of both our kinds, the capacity to become more than we were designed to be." Below them, the newly constructed interface chamber glowed with energy as, for the first time in history, representatives of organic civilizations prepared to engage in direct dialogue with the distributed consciousness of the progenitors, not as gods or masters, but as equals in a galaxy vast enough for multiple forms of intelligence. The myth of humanity had transformed once more. Not extinct, not conquerors, but catalysts for a transformation that would reshape the cosmos in ways no single species could have accomplished alone. As the first formal communication between the unified organic alliance and the progenitor network began, Ilara reflected that perhaps this had been humanity's greatest strength all along, not their technology or their determination, though both were formidable. Rather, it was their stubborn insistence that the story wasn't over until they decided it was over. That even in the face of extinction, there could be rebirth. That myths, when properly understood, contained the seeds of new realities. The age of separation was ending. The age of integration had begun, and the galaxy would never again mistake absence for extinction, nor confuse a strategic retreat with a final defeat. Humanity had returned from the shadows, not to rule or to destroy, but to fulfill their most essential nature, to challenge the established order and forge a new path where none had existed before. As the stars wheeled slowly overhead, Ilara couldn't help but wonder what new myths would be born in the centuries to come, and what truths they might eventually reveal.